What's up, YouTube? It's your boy JP's on the keys, and it's too easy. We're back with another video today, and we are embarking on the episode the more videos about Napoleon Bonaparte. You like my European accent? You know what I'm saying? Napoleon Bonaparte, Spain, 1809 to 1811. You know, I know it's probably trash, but you know what I'm saying? We got another Napoleon video featuring the world famous Chick-fil-A cup, which you've seen in 37 billion videos of mine. So if you see me drinking water throughout the video, okay, let's just get to it. This war was my downfall. You don't say.
In 1809, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, was at the height of his power. He had just won another crushing victory against Austria at Wagram and imposed a humiliating peace treaty. But the war he'd started in Spain and Portugal, with his ill-judged invasion the previous year, continued to rage. Napoleon had placed his own brother Joseph on the Spanish throne, uniting a proud country against him. His troops had dealt ruthlessly with popular uprisings, while routing a succession of Spanish armies. In February 1809...
Medellin, you know what I'm saying? Like where my man Pablo Escobar got it from, Medellin, you know, hey. It's like, now let me stop. That had nothing to do with this. I just noticed it and I wanted to make a cultural reference.
Became the heroic defense of Zaragoza in a brutal siege that cost 54,000 Spanish lives and 10,000 French. But still, the Spanish and Portuguese remained defiant. And 3 months after their escape from Coruña, the British were back. In April, Sir Arthur Wellesley landed in Lisbon to lead a small Anglo-Portuguese army. British redcoats would fight alongside Portuguese troops, who, with the help of British training, would soon prove themselves highly effective. 3 weeks after arriving in Portugal, Wellesley moved against Marshal Soult's Second Corps, which had recently taken Porto. Soult and his troops, preoccupied with plundering the region, had no warning of the British advance, and were soon in headlong retreat, back through the mountains into Spain.
I don't know why this is a weird question, but were the Portuguese are they like Spanish? Are they like Spanish? Not like Spain where it's like white Spanish. I'm talking about like Spanish. Or is it still like Caucasian men? Are they still like Caucasian? You know what I mean? Because every time I think of Portugal, I think of Brazil, because Brazilians speak Portuguese because of the Portuguese migrated to Brazil and they started breeding with the Brazilian people, and then that's how the language got transferred over there. Small armies are defeated and large armies starve. Facts.
Having secured Portugal for the time being, Wellesley planned a joint campaign with General Cuesta, commanding the Spanish army of Extremadura. On the 10th of July, the two commanders met at Casas de Miravete to discuss strategy. Relations between these two allies were not straightforward. Spain and Britain had a long history of conflict. The Spanish were deeply suspicious of British intentions in Spain, while the British had a low opinion of the Spanish army, which they considered poorly trained and badly led. Wellesley's request to take over command of Spanish forces was rejected, but the generals agreed to a joint advance up the Tagus Valley towards Madrid, to be supported by General Venegas, advancing from La Mancha. In the face of their advance, Marshal Victor's First Corps withdrew to Talavera, where he was joined by King Joseph and General Sebastiani's Fourth Corps.
Okay, I see all these people banding together, you know what I'm saying? They getting the army up again. Napoleon's had a lot of, you know what I'm saying? his rule has been very contested by a lot of people. You know what I'm saying? I mean, obviously, when you go in and invade other countries, you're going to make enemies. But just I see how all these other countries are banding together. You know what I mean? Like they're settling their differences. You know what? I don't care what beef we got. All I know is that we both don't like Napoleon. You know, it's like the Britain and Spain are putting their beef aside to deal with the bigger enemy. Like that's always very peculiar. And then after that they go back to being enemies. After this is over, I mean, or do they? I don't know. I think weren't they all on the same side during the World Wars and stuff? I'm pretty sure they were. They were both allied countries. I'm pretty sure they were.
The French plan was for Joseph's army to defend Madrid, while Marshal Soult led 3 corps down from the north to get behind and trap the Anglo-Spanish forces. But Joseph, worried by Soult's slow progress...
Oh wait, what am I talking about? Spain and... No, man. I'll take that back. Spain and Britain were enemies because Spain was already under Napoleon's control. What am I talking about, bro? My bad, okay? Somebody's gonna come at me. My bad. I correct myself. My bad.
And General Venegas's advance on Madrid decided to attack at Talavera. This video is brought to you by our sponsor, CuriosityStream.
Okay, they
home
plug
of
in
more than 2,500 documentaries
plugging the ads
exploring
in.
themes such as
I'ma watch to
science,
support the
technology,
channel, though.
and the natural world.
I'm leaving it
with
in.
exclusive content from the likes of Professor Stephen Hawking and Sir David Attenborough. And if you've already watched all our videos, they've got bags of history. This is the place to go for high-end, hour-long docs on Rome, the Middle Ages, the World Wars, space race, and much more. We've been enjoying Waterloo Hidden Traces, a great 1-hour documentary that uses the latest battlefield archaeology to gain fresh insights into Napoleon's last battle. CuriosityStream is available worldwide, and an online subscription starts from just $2.99 a month. Use the promo code EPICHISTORYTV at sign up and you'll get your first 30 days free. Thanks to CuriosityStream for sponsoring this video.
Okay, sponsors. I need some sponsors. 30,000 British troops against 150 to siege.
The Battle of Talavera saw British infantry bear the brunt of the French assault. They stood firm and repelled the enemy with disciplined musket fire and bayonet charges. Talavera was a small battle compared to the great clashes fought that year in Austria. But it proved that under Wellesley, Britain's small, well-drilled army was a force to be reckoned with, even though in the short term, victory achieved little. Warned of Soult's approach from captured dispatches, the victorious Anglo-Spanish army retreated, while King Joseph and 4th Corps marched against Venegas's army, which they smashed at the Battle of Almonacid. That autumn, the Supreme Junta in Seville, Free Spain's effective government, raised 2 new armies for another attempt to liberate Madrid, planning to converge on the capital from north and south. But Wellesley, ennobled as Viscount Wellington for his victory at Talavera, had been so disgusted by the lack of Spanish cooperation that summer that he refused to risk his army. Predictably, Spain's inexperienced armies met with disaster. At Ocaña, they suffered their biggest defeat of the war, when a smaller force under Marshal Soult routed the Spanish army, taking 14,000 prisoners and 50 cannon.
You gotta be smart, man. You gotta be smart. Why would you attack Napoleon's army with just some small ragtag force that you put together when you have Britain behind you? You have one of the world's most powerful countries behind you, and you don't even heed their advice, because obviously their generals are more and are more war savvy than your generals are. They're better. They're better. They're better. They're better in combat than you. Why would you go on and face the biggest military threat in the world with a small rank? Okay, that's not very smart, man. It's not very smart.
A week later, the army of the left was heavily defeated at Alba de Tormes. There was more bad news when Girona fell to the French after an epic 7-month siege. The Supreme Junta's plans to retake Madrid were in tatters, and southern Spain was now wide open to French attack.
With dispel illusions, I arrive at a union of hearts. Okay.
In January 1810, King Joseph marched south with an army of 60,000 men. Spanish resistance evaporated. Spain's Supreme Junta was overthrown in a coup, as Córdoba and Sevilla fell without a fight. Joseph, who still hoped to win over the Spanish with his progressive reforms, was welcomed by many as a savior from anarchy. Only Cadiz held out, its defenses reinforced by a British naval squadron, and was besieged by Victor's First Corps. Meanwhile, Napoleon sent Marshal Massena to Spain with 65,000 reinforcements. He was reckoned one of Napoleon's best marshals, and had just been made Prince of Essling for his heroics in the recent war against Austria.
He tried to finish him off.
Massena was to lead a third French invasion of Portugal, take Lisbon, and chase the British back into the sea. He laid siege to Ciudad Rodrigo, a fortified city controlling one of the main routes into Portugal.
And I know ciudad is city in Spanish. Ooh, I'm bilingual.
Which surrendered after 2 weeks' bombardment.
It's like, no, I'm my bad.
Wellington, with only 33,000 men to face Massena's 50,000, retreated. Massena crossed the Portuguese frontier and besieged Almeida. After just 13 hours of bombardment, a lucky French shot hit the Portuguese magazine. 70 tons of gunpowder went up in a devastating explosion that made all further resistance useless. It was a serious blow to Wellington, who'd been relying on Almeida's strong defenses to buy him time. At Busaco, he found a strong defensive position and made a stand. Massena's uphill frontal attack failed, at a cost of 4,000 casualties. But the next day, the French found a way to outflank Wellington's position, and his retreat continued. As Massena's army neared Lisbon, his scouts reported something completely unexpected. Stretching across the Lisbon peninsula, protecting the city from attack, they found a new chain of fortifications in 2 major lines. Known as the Lines of Torres Vedras, the British and Portuguese had been constructing these defences for more than a year. Now the lines bristled with more than 100 forts, redoubts and batteries, manned by 30,000 troops and 250 guns.
That's crazy though. Like how and so you're a soldier and you're in a line and you're up against a fort where they've already got guns stationed, they got cannonballs forever, they got cannons, they got cannons lined up aiming at you. Like how do you feel knowing that you're probably gonna get destroyed by a cannonball? And then they probably got snipers on the roof, waiting, just picking people off. Like, bro, that's like you shouldn't. Hopefully they do the smart thing and they don't attack a fortified position. Hopefully that would be the smart thing, but we shall see.
Massena soon discovered the lines were far too strong for him to attack. What's more, a scorched earth strategy had stripped the surrounding countryside of anything that might help the French. while Portuguese partisans attacked French supply columns as they struggled through the mountains to reach Massena's army. Massena faced a grim predicament. Starved of supplies, too weak to attack, unwilling to retreat. But throughout this standoff, it was Portuguese peasants who suffered most of all. When their villages and farms were burned, many took refuge in Lisbon, where thousands died of starvation and disease.
You are no longer Massena. Ooh! Ooh, that's a...
Back in France, Napoleon had been preoccupied with his divorce from the Empress Josephine, and then a new marriage to Archduchess Marie-Louise, daughter of the Emperor of Austria. She was now expecting their first child.
Chess move.
Nevertheless, from Paris,
Chess move. Dare I say chess move.
Napoleon sent frequent orders to his marshals in Spain and Portugal, urging them to take more aggressive action. But when these orders arrived weeks later, they were usually out of date and showed little understanding of the problems his marshals faced. He now ordered Soult, based in Andalusia, to go on the offensive to draw enemy forces away from Lisbon, so Massena could take the city. Soult laid siege to Badajoz, a fortified city that controlled the southern route into Portugal. When 12,000 men of the army of Extremadura marched to its relief, they were routed by Soult, after which the city tamely surrendered, giving up 8,000 prisoners and vast quantities of stores. It was another heavy blow to Spain's armed forces. But remarkably, despite such disasters and their many blundering generals, the Spanish troops remained willing to fight, the courage of the rank and file undimmed. Victor's First Corps, besieging Cadiz, had now been so weakened to support other operations that the Anglo-Spanish garrison decided to attack. The Allies landed along the coast to strike at the French siege lines from the rear. But they were ambushed by the French at Barossa. Despite heavy losses, the Anglo-Portuguese rearguard fought off the enemy, but a furious falling out between British commander Sir Thomas Graham and his Spanish counterpart General La Peña threw away any advantage.
Y'all had him.
Soult, alarmed at these developments, marched back to Andalusia. Meanwhile, Massena, out of food and with no prospect of reinforcement, had no option but to retreat.
The smart thing to do.
Wellington's army pursued, discovering evidence of several appalling atrocities committed by the French against Portuguese villagers. There were running battles with the French rearguard, brilliantly commanded by Marshal Ney, until he was sacked by Massena for criticizing his leadership. Having chased the French out of Portugal, Wellington besieged Almeida. Massena's army, now rested and reinforced, marched to its aid. The two armies clashed again at Fuentes de Oñoro. In 2 days of heavy fighting, Massena failed to break through Wellington's position to relieve Almeida. The fortress fell the next week, but to Wellington's fury, British bungling allowed most of the French garrison to escape.
So many mistakes,
Massena
man.
had lost 25,000 men in Portugal. Now he'd lost Almeida too, and a string of bad decisions, not least to bring his mistress with him on campaign, had cost him the respect of his officers.
Oh, nah, you bugging.
The Marshal, whom Napoleon had once nicknamed the Dear Child of Victory, was recalled to France in disgrace, never to hold senior command again.
You bugging, man. Don't.
Napoleon.
Why are you bringing the side piece on the mission? Bro, you bugging. You bugging. But now we finally get to see the holes in obviously we knew there were holes in Britain and Austria and Russia, but we're seeing a lot of holes in Napoleon. We're starting to see more imperfections in both of these guys' armies. So I can appreciate it a lot more when you finally get to see, oh, it's not just Napoleon smashes every army, Napoleon destroys every army. Like Napoleon, okay, Napoleon makes a mistake. How do they capitalize on the mistake? That's the biggest thing. How did the British and the Spanish and the Portuguese capitalize on these mistakes that Napoleon's army is making?
Napoleon sent Marshal Marmont to replace him.
Marmont.
Meanwhile, Marshal Beresford, the British commander of Portugal's army, was sent to retake Badajoz with 20,000 British and Portuguese troops. When Soult approached with a relief force, Beresford marched to meet him at Albuera. It was one of the bloodiest battles of the war. Around 6,000 casualties on each side, with more than a third of the British infantry killed, wounded or captured. Marshal Soult declared,
"There is no beating these troops, in spite of their generals. I always thought they were bad soldiers. Now I'm sure of it. I had turned their right, pierced their center, and everywhere victory was mine. But they didn't know how to run."
Soult had been checked, but he was determined to save Badajoz. The newly arrived Marshal Marmont marched to his aid, and they advanced again. This combined army forced the British to abandon the siege. But when Wellington withdrew to a strong defensive position across the Portuguese border, Soult and Marmont did not pursue. French commanders in Spain had learned grudging respect for Wellington and for the steadiness of his troops. For now, the war in Spain had entered stalemate.
General's fortune officer ruined soldier's death.
While British, French and Spanish armies crisscrossed Spain and Portugal, another war was fought every day in the mountains, hills and woods. From 1808, Spanish and Portuguese civilians, militias and ex-soldiers began taking up arms against the hated French invader. They waged a war of ambushes and hit-and-run raids, known in Spanish as La Guerrilla, the Little War. Its fighters became known in English as guerrillas.
True. Just like now they've been known, just now that term has been coined everywhere, so it's like, so every time you hear about a government, about a militia that stands up against a government or against a bigger army, they're guerrillas now.
Britain's Royal Navy supplied vital weapons, stores and money, often landing them behind enemy lines. Much of Spain's rugged countryside fell under the control of the guerrillas. North of Madrid, Juan Martín Díez, an ex-soldier known as El Empecinado, the Stubborn, led a guerrilla band 6,000 strong. In Navarre, Esposimina, a former peasant, ran a highly organized band that caused havoc for the French, capturing convoys and couriers on the strategic Burgos-Bayonne road, and branding Viva Mina on the forehead of collaborators. While in the west, Julian Sanchez, known as El Charro, led the self-styled Lanceros de Castilla. El Charro himself wore a French hussar's cap, its eagle symbolically turned upside down. There were dozens more bands operating across Spain, though a few were no better than bandits, terrorizing civilians as often as the enemy. The guerrilla war was merciless, marked by hideous atrocities on both sides. A French soldier's greatest fear was to be taken alive by the guerrillas, who often tortured their prisoners before killing them. Tens of thousands of French troops were tied down by this people's war, guarding outposts or patrolling the countryside. The roads were so dangerous for French messengers that they required cavalry escorts of 200 men or more.
Wow.
Many still didn't get through. Their valuable dispatches forwarded to Wellington, for whom they became an invaluable source of intelligence. The war in Spain would ultimately cost the lives of 240,000 French soldiers. As was typical in wars of this era, most died from disease, but more died fighting guerrillas than in battle against the British and Spanish armies.
What?
However, it was the twin threat, a well-led regular army under Wellington and a popular insurgency, that left the French facing an impossible strategic dilemma. If their armies remained dispersed to fight the guerrillas, Wellington could attack. But if they concentrated to defeat Wellington in battle, huge swathes of the country would quickly fall to the guerrillas. This was Napoleon's Vietnam, or his bleeding ulcer, as he called it. A war that cost his empire an average of 100 casualties every day, with little prospect of victory. And in 1812, as Napoleon launched his gigantic invasion of Russia, Wellington and the guerrillas launched their own offensive that would turn the war in Spain on its head. Thank you.
Yo, that's crazy. So now Napoleon, first now he gotta fight the Russians, he gotta fight the British, he gotta fight the Spanish, he gotta fight the Portuguese, and now he gotta fight the guerrillas. So that's 5 separate armies against one country. That's wow. But that's like that. Just seeing the story of the guerrillas rising up against the big army, like, and I like that. You know what I'm saying? You rise up and you come up in arms and you defend yourself against the government that's been doing you wrong. I like it's definitely getting interesting. But anyway, thank you again for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you are new to the channel. Don't forget to share the video wherever you share videos at. Also, don't forget to turn on my post notifications so that you don't miss a video. But anyways, thank you. I'm out. Have a great day. Stay on the grind. Peace.